We're on Kuf Mem Zayin Amud Beis. Amar Rava. Right there in the dinim of Shchemira. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman. Shchemira she'amar Yadur Pliny Vayizeh Yochel Pliny Peres Dekolzeh. Right, so Shchemira, there's a few. We know that the Shchemira has a unique din that he can make a matana to someone when he's dying, and he doesn't have to write it down. There doesn't need to be a star. Let's give Lizzie a chance to log in. We're on Kuf Mem Zayin Amud Beis in the middle of the Yom. So again, we're just reviewing what a Shchemira is, the Matna Shchemira. We saw a shita that it was deraisa. We saw a shita is derabanan. It was a smachta from deraisa. But in any case, the rule of a shchemira is a couple of things. First of all, a shchemira who gives a matana when he's dying, he doesn't have to write it down. He doesn't need a star. He can just say it, which is a unique. Usually matana, you need a kinyan. Secondly, a matna shchemira, a person could be chayzer on it before death. As long as he's alive, he can change his mind. And the third thing, which this is not going to be relevant to later on the blot, but it's good to keep in mind that a matna shchemira is only if the person is giving away all of his possessions. That we saw in the Mishnah, right? If you're giving away only part of your possessions, that's a regular matana, and that will apply. And the fourth thing is, of course, if a shchemira doesn't die, then the matna shchemira is nullified. But if he gave a matana of less than the full amount of his possessions, then we say it's not a matana shchemira. It's a regular matana. As long as he made a kinyan, that matana is kain. Okay. This is not really relevant yet, but we're just to get ourselves in the mood. Amar Rav, Amar Rav Nachman. Shchemira she'amar, middle of Kuf Mem Zayin. Shchemira she'amar, Yadur Pliny V'bayizeh, Yochel Pliny Peres Dekolzeh. He says to someone, he gives to someone, that you should live in this house, and you should eat the peris of this decal, of this palm tree. Le'amar klum. It's not going to work. Ad sheyomer tnu bayezel pliny v'yader by. Until he says, give the ownership of this house, and that he can be darned. Meaning, the right to live in a house or the right to the fruits of a tree are not tangible things. You can't give someone something that doesn't have a hook. It has to have a something that can be touched, something physical that it's attached to in order to give away that ability. So if someone wants to give away a matna shchemira of the right to eat peris or the right to live in a house, it has to be that he's saying, I'm giving you the house to live in it, or I'm giving you the tree to get the pears. So what do you see from this? You see that we're applying the general rules of ownership that we have by everyone else to a matna shchemira. We're saying, since you can never give such a thing, you can't give something amorphous, something intangible. It has to be attached to something tangible when you give a gift. So the same will apply by a shchemira. And the Gemara, the insinuation of the Gemara is, one might have thought that a matna shchemira is different. The chamu misakin, under these circumstances, a person can make a unique type of matana. Maybe it could include even something that wouldn't be tenable under the general rules of kinyan and the general rules of matana. So we're saying no. We see, but from the fact that we're saying that even the matna shchemira, he has to give the right to live in the house and the right to the peris together with a physical part that he's getting a right in the house to live in it, and a right in the tree to get the peris. Only those things that work on a regular matana are going to work by shchemira. Practically, Mara is this true of Amar Rav Nachman shchemira.
What would be the thing laced of a shchemira? You're saying
both sides.
All right.
The positive and the negative, both true. Amar Rav Nachman. If a shchemira says, give over this money that I'm owed to someone else, and we're talking about a halva that was not written in a star. It's a milva al peh. And he says, I'm giving over this Reuven. Reuven owes money to Shimon, and Shimon says, I'm giving, and Shimon is now a shchemira, and Shimon says, I want to give this halva that's owed to me from, I'm sorry, Reuven lent money to Shimon, right? So Shimon owes money to Reuven, and Reuven is about to die, and Reuven says, I want to give this loan to Levi. Halva leploini. Reuven has the ability to convey the halva to Levi. The lesson beberia. Even though such a thing would not work by a beria, there's no way. It's a chiddush to me, but the Gemara says there's no way to convey over a halva al peh. There's no kinyan to make.
Well, we had that Gemara this week about that.
We had differently. We said that if someone sold a note, that was talking about a star, a milva b'shtar, you can give over the star, and we said that the person who gave it over still retains the actual loan, but he's able to convey the shibud. But over here, there's no star. So since there's no star, there's nothing.
That he wasn't able to convey the shibud, right? That was the whole chiddush.
No, we said you could convey over the shibud, but you can't convey the essence of the loan. So therefore the lender always has the right, even though he sold the shibud to
give it. Right.
That was a milva b'shtar that he was able to convey. But let's say it was a milva b'al peh, he couldn't even convey over the shibud. Because if he writes a star, that star is on nothing. It can't attach to anything. You can't. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly why. Why can't he write a star for the shibud? I guess the point is you can't create a shibud without a loan. It has to be created with a loan. But the point is, such a conveyance of the fact that someone owes you money does not work, not in the context of a shchemira, but we're saying it does work for a shchemira. Shchemira can do it. So you see that there is a nafkamina, that there are things that a shchemira can do, even though they wouldn't normally work. So no, there are situations under which someone can even convey a halva al peh while he's a barrier. If someone says, if Reuven
did you skip
owed money from Shimon,
you skipped? Did you say Rav Papa?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I skipped Rav Papa. Rav Papa amahoil v'yoirish yarsha. Rav Papa says the matna shchemira works in a specific way. A matna shchemira is a form of Yerusha. A person's about to die. So the Tchamim were Mesa, we're going to Rav Nachman, so going that it's Takanas Chachamim, and they set it up that this person can be like an instant Yerush. A Yerush can inherit the right to collect a loan. It's true that a person can't give over a loan, but a person can inherit the right. So that's why, specifically in this case, a matna shchemira has more kayach than a general matana. While it's true that the din that we said on Amud Beis, that when you're trying to give over something without mamoshes, you want to give over a right to Paris or to live in a house, that doesn't work. That's because that's not something that's given over with Yerusha. But this is something that's given over Yerusha. That's why Rav Papa says it works. Halva does work by a barrier. There are situations under which you can convey over a loan a milva al peh. If Reuven owes money to Shimon, and Shimon says, I want to give it to Levi, if Reuven's standing there, kana. It works. You can do such a kinyan. So there is circumstances under which even a barrier can convey over a loan, and therefore a shchemira, it's true that a shchemira can't make a kinyan, according to this Tana, this Amora. You can't make a kinyan on something that never exists by a barrier, but since this, under some circumstances, a halva can be conveyed, can be a barrier can be makna, a halva, therefore we allow it by a shchemira as well. New topic. Ibaylu, still within shchemira. Ibaylu. Actually, this is not even shchemira. Ibaylu dekel le'echad upeiroisav la'achar. Someone says, I'm giving my dekel to one person and I'm giving the peiros to a second person. of this, the Paris of that tree, of that palm tree. Mahu. So the way Taisus, we're going to go with Taisus Pshat. The Rashbam understands it, that this is all a question that's dependent on the sugya on Amud Beis, and he therefore has to change. The Rashbam seems to have a different girsa in the Gemara. So therefore, we're going to go. The reason why the Rashbam says his Pshat is because according to this Pshat, this is a totally new question. It's not related to the previous question, and he wants it to be related to the Gemara before. But we're going to go with Taisus Pshat, where we're talking about someone who gave a matana he gave a matana, he had a decal, and he said, Yaakov said, Ruvain should get the tree, and Shimon should get the pears. Mao, what's it in? Mishayim Malkum Peri, or Loishayim. You can't just give, like we just said before, you can't give over just pears. You can't give over the pears without attaching it to anything. It's a davar shalom b'olam. It doesn't have any mamashas. But what you can do is you could say, I'm giving you the way the Rashbam says it. The way Taisus says it over here. He says that you can give over a little bit of the tree together with the pears. So I'm giving you this bit of the tree, the blossom of where the pears are going to come out. I'm giving that to Shimon. Reuben is getting everything except for that little bit of the tree. I always thought that when we say dekel leperosav, it means he's giving him a right in the tree. He's giving him a certain ownership of the whole tree, that he gets the pears out of it. Not that he gets a small physical part of the tree, but he gets a right he has an ownership of the tree, legabi, that he gets the pears, but not that it's localized to a specific part. But that's the way Taisus describes it over here. We've had this dekel leperosav in other places as well, and I've never understood the way Taisus describes it over here. But in any case, that's the question over here. If someone gave over his dekel, part of it to Reuven and part of it to Shimon, he gave the dekel to Reuven and the pears to Shimon, is it implicit in that he's giving Shimon a portion of the tree so that his matana of the pears will also be good? Amr Rav Nachman. I'm sorry, I skipped again. And if you'll say, in this case, where Yaakov gave part to Reuven and part to Shimon, he gave to Reuven the tree itself, and he gave the pears to Shimon, we're going to say he doesn't reserve anything he didn't leave over, and it means he didn't reserve for Reuven. So he didn't leave over for Shimon to get it. What about if he said, it means we say that no, he gives it as he said. He gave the tree to Reuven and the fruit to Shimon, and therefore Shimon doesn't get anything because he didn't get any part of the tree, and it's a davar shalom. What happens? What if he said that the pears are going to himself? I'm giving the tree to Reuven, but I'm keeping the pears for myself. Do we say in that case, when he gives away, he's doing it in a way, and he's keeping for the pears, he wants to keep the pears in a way they'll be able to actually get the pears? Amar Nachman, imtim saloim dekel echad, uperosav la'achal lo yahavishir. So the Rav Nachman says the teretz. If Taki will say that it's no shear in the case of where he's giving it to a different person, in that case he does it. The pears don't go. Malkum peri lo yahavishir malkum peri dekel la'echad b'shayar perosav lefanav. But in this second case, where he gave away the dekel and he kept the pears for himself, shayar malkum peri. In that case, he does keep the pears for himself. My time up. This is just speaking out the sad that we said before. He's saying Einachanami. We would say that La'atzma is different because he certainly gave over the pears in a way that he was Mishayir a Malkum in the tree, so he should actually get the pears that he tried to keep for himself.
And La'achar, even though he's telling the person that he wants to give him the tree, then he's not doing it.
Nothing is as powerful as self-interest. You're giving, you say, okay, listen, I'm giving the tree, but I'm not willing to give the pears to Shimon. Pears, I'm willing to, if it doesn't work for Shimon, he's not getting the pears. Too bad. I wanted to give the whole tree to Reuben. But for himself, he's more concerned. Anan, we have a version of this this discussion where we're mechalik between when you give a gift to someone else and you give a gift to yourself, we have it on the sugya of Rav Shimon ben Lakish. Anan ad Rav Shimon ben Lakish masila. The Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish. Hamoicha bayis l'chaver. Someone who sold a house to his friend. This, where did we have this? We have this back, I don't know, a few months ago. Someone sold a house and he said, I'm keeping the upper level, the rooftop, for myself. Now, the Gemara before had said that the general rule is anyone who leaves the upper, who sells a house, always leaves the upper level to himself. So why did he say this? So Rav Zvid, we're going to see, the Gemara is going to bring Rav Zvid in a minute, but Rav Zvid says it's that he should be able to build extensions out of the side of the roof. Otherwise, everything belongs to the owner of the house. But if the person sold it, he sold it by that I'm keeping it for myself, he also is reserving for himself the right to build out of the side of the roof into the airspace of the house. So, that's taka the rule. He gets to build out from the side of the house. What if instead of keeping it for himself, he said, I'm selling the house to one person and I'm selling the upstairs portion, the rooftop, to another person? Is he, since he wants to, do we say that since, just like if he kept it for himself, he would then, since when he gives away the first floor, it never includes the roof. So he's saying I'm giving the roof to a second person. We say just like if he kept it for himself, he said I'm keeping it for myself. His intention is to mean that he gets not just the rooftop, but also the ability to extend out from it. Would that also hold true if he gave it to a different person? If you say, if he said I'm giving to one and not to the other, it's not a shear, meaning that he doesn't give any extra to the new person who's owning the rooftop. He just gave him the bare bones, but not any extra. What if he said, I'm giving, instead of that, he said, he didn't say I'm giving you the bottom portion, al manas, or al t'nai, that I keep the top. But rather he said, I'm selling it to you, except I'm leaving out the top. Is that going to have the same effect as if he said that I'm keeping for myself the top? Does that also mean that he's trying to keep for himself this yuta, that this extra yuta? I mean, the problem is that we're really reading in this whole extra memory of Zvid, that he's going to be able to keep what's on top. But the Gemara is going to say in a second. This is again the same thing. We're restating the question and then saying the teretz. If you'll say that if you give it to two separate people, in that case he doesn't reserve the right to project out of the rooftop. Chutz mediyuta havishir. But if he says chutz mediyuta, it is a shir. I'll leave it there of Zvid. And this is going according to Rav Zvid. The Amar shemratza lahoisi bazizin moitzi. If he wants to be moitzi zizin, he can be moitzi. Alma keeping the shire diyuta malkum zizin nami shire. So you see, since he said chutz, since he's shire diyuta, he's also being mashire for himself the malkum zizin. Okay, so this is not the same as it's a different question than the first question of whether the first question, the first version, the question was, is a person who reserves for himself different than if he's giving to someone else? Now we're saying this din that we say if he reserves it for himself, he says, I'm giving it, but I'm keeping the dyuta for myself. That's different. Is that different than if he says the lashon of chutz, which is not as explicit as saying that I'm keeping it, I want the top part to go to me?
So what's lechoitze bozizin?
I'm sorry?
What's lechoitze bozizin mean?
That means to make projections go out of the side of the, like we said, automatically when you give a house, you don't give the rooftop portion. So saying, does he get that additional privilege if he says that I'm keeping the dyuta, which he didn't have to say, does he also intend to keep the privilege of making projections out of the rooftop area? Amr of Yosef ben Yumi, Amr of Nachman. Shchibera shekasav kol nechasav la'acher. A shchibera who said he wrote he wants to give all his nechasim to other people. Royan, im machalik meis. If he's giving away everything to all, he's dividing everything up to all of them. Kanu, kula. Amad, but if he gets better, chayze bekulan, then everything is bottled, because we said a shchimera, if he doesn't die, whatever matna shchimera he made as a matna shchimera is bottled. In benimlach, however, if he gave a portion, and then he said maybe I'll give a little more, and he said I'll give a little more, until he ended up giving everything. If he's meis kanukulan, if he dies in the end, they're all kainim. We're talking about over here, where, meis kanukulan, they're all kainim because of the man shchimera. Amad, but if he's amad, ein a chayze ela ba'achron. We're talking about over here where he made kinyanim as he was going along. So even if you make a kinyan with a matna shchimera, if he gets better, that kinyan is chayzik. But if he was being nimlach, he was giving and then he was thinking and he was giving more and he's giving more, all of them, and he gets better, he's only chayzer on the last one, because the first ones were not given as a matna shchimera. Until he finally decided to give everything away, it's not a matna shchimera, it's a regular matana. But the last one, it becomes a matna shchimera. So that one, if he gets better, that's going to be bata. For the Gemara, the Dilma Iyunikamiyayin, Vahadayav. How do we know that what's happening here is that he's deciding about whether to give a matna shchimera? Maybe it means maybe he gave to the first one, and it wasn't that he was deciding whether he's giving away everything. Maybe from the beginning he intended to give everything, but he's just deciding who to give it to. So he's just trying to get clear in his head who gets what. But it's not that he was deciding what he's going to do. So Gemara, no, that's not what normally would happen. Normally the way it works, when a person decides to give a matna shchimera, he already decided what he's doing. He doesn't say start giving things away and then think as on his feet. It's a pretty serious situation. Like they say, hanging concentrates the mind wonderfully. The process of hanging, right? I know I'm butchering the quote, but that's the, yeah. Amar Vacha bar Minyum Amar Rav Nachman. Shchimei Rasha Kosav Kol Nechasav La'acher. A shchimei that wrote all of his nechasim should go to others. Amar, and he got better. Ein a chayzer. He's not chayzer. It doesn't make a difference. It still goes. Chayshin and Shemi Yeshlei nechasim b'nei acharis, because maybe he really didn't give everything. This sounds like nothing like we've seen before, right? Until now we've been saying, we saw in the Mishnah, we saw this cloud that if you give away everything, that means it's a matna shchimera. Now we'll be saying, how do you know? Maybe he's got, you always hear about once a year, a couple times a year, you hear that the state has all this unclaimed funds, there's all this property. Maybe he had one bank account with, where he got all his credit card points, went into that bank account. He got 2% from a credit card. It has $242 in it that he didn't give to anyone. So then his whole matna shchimera is bottled because he didn't give away all his assets. Ein matanasai matana. Ein matanasai kemes. Heichem mishkavasla. We said if he didn't leave over any karka, his matana is not kayim. Meaning that we said if someone doesn't leave over any karka of himself, then if he gets better, it doesn't go to the people he gave it to. How are you going to find it? Because you never know that he really gave everything. So if we don't know, so maybe it should be Mekayim. His matana, not as a matna shchimera, but it's a regular matana. Amar Rav Chama.
Well, I thought the question was, in other words, you always would have a situation. You would never have a situation. In every situation, he did leave karka for himself. Now, there's no way to know that he didn't leave anything over.
Right. I'm saying, but it happens to be we're talking about Lagabi the Nafkamina the other way. If he gets better,
right.
then it's going to not be a matana because he gave everything away. But we'll say, but the reason is, but why
Right.
should we be cautious that maybe there's someone else somewhere so it really should be a matana? We're talking about where he said, this is all my nechasim. So he indicated himself, this is everything I own, so there's no reason for us to be chayshish. The Leslie. We're talking about where it's known this is the extent of what he owns. So you can't include anything else. Okay, now we're going to get it. This is a little bit of a brain teaser. I hope the Olam has enough kayach to attack it on a Motzei Shabbos. Ibaylu. Chazar b'mixes havi chazar b'kula oila. We're talking about a seemingly not a separate question from Shchimera, but we'll get back to Shchimera. We're going to use Shchimera to bring a right. If someone gave, well, it has to do with if someone, we said that a Shchimera can be chayzer on his matana as long as he's alive. So what happened if Yaakov was the one who was dying? He was the Shchimera, and he gave a matana to Reuven of karka A, B, and C. And then a week later, Yaakov is still alive. He says, you know what? I want to give Sada A, I want to give it to Shimon instead of to Reuven. So the question is, Havi Chazar B'Kula Oilai. Do we certainly Shimon is going to got a matana of Sada A. The question is, when he gave that Sada A to Shimon instead of Reuven, is he saying that the matana that I originally gave to Reuven, I regret it and I don't want Reuven to get anything? Or is he just saying, no, I'm taking away one of the fields that I gave to Reuven and giving it to Shimon, but Reuven will still retain Sada B and Sada C. Tashma. Kulon l'rishon u'miktsason l'sheni. This is the same case. If someone gave all of his possessions to Yaakov, gave all of his possessions to Reuven, and some of them he gave to Shimon. He gave A, B, and C to Reuven, and he gave A to Shimon afterwards. Sheni kana, Rishon loy kana. The din is that the second one is kana, and the Rishon is not kana. So the one says, "My love v'shemes." Are we not talking about where Yaakov ended up dying, and now we're saying he was chayzer on the original matana to Reuven, and therefore that's why Shimon gets and Reuven doesn't. So no, it doesn't have to be Shemes. B'sha'amad. We're talking about where Reuven got up and he had made a kinyan when he gave it to Shimon. So if he's Amad, the kinyan to Reuven was a matnash chimera. So he gave everything to Reuven. It was a matnash chimera, so that's batal. What he gave to Shimon is not batal, because that was not a matnash chimera. He only gave him one karka. Now the Gemara later on is going to say it still proves that it's considered to be that he was chayzer. Because if he wasn't chayzer on the original matana, then Shimon should also be a matnash chimera, right? Because he's still giving A and B. He's giving B and C to Reuven and A to Shimon. So he's giving everything. So when he gave to Shimon, Shimon should also be chayzer. The Gemara is going to ask that. You could bring a raya from that as well. But at this point, the Gemara hasn't glommed onto that svara. In any case, the Gemara says, and Hachanan Mistaber L'chayra, it is talking about B'Sha'amad and not B'Shemes. Militani Seifa, Miksas and L'Rishon. The Seifa says if he gave some of it to the first one. B'Kulon L'Sheni. I mean, he gave Sada A to Reuven, and then he gave B and C to Shimon. We say Rishon kana, Sheni loy kana. The first one is kana, the second one is not. So if we're talking about where he got up, So we can understand why the Rishon is kaina. When he gave to the Rishon, he hadn't given away everything. So therefore, that was not a matnas chemira. The second one was a matnas chemira. We can understand why the second one is not kaina, because that was a matnas chemira, the matana to the sheni. Both of them should be kaina. Also matnas chemira. The first one is going to be kaina in either case. In this case, right? If the second one is not a kinyan, what's the svara? Yeah. So right, but if they were mace, both of them, the first one should keep it because his was not a matnas chemira, and then whatever was left, he gave to the second one. So that should be a matnas chemira. It should work. So yeah, now we're getting back to the svara we had said before. But tahavi never b'sha'amad. It doesn't make you haven't helped yourself by saying it's talking about b'sha'amad if you're trying to avoid the conclusion that if someone is chayzer when he gives part of what he had given to the first one to the second one, that we had come to the conclusion that he's chayzer. It must be that he's chayzer for the first one. Yam b'sham l'chazor and b'mixes havi chazara b'kula hainu d'sheni miyas kana. Then we could understand why the second one is kana. Ali amar chazara mixes le'avi chazara. If you say that the gift to Ruvain is still in place, so he still gets Sada, I forgot what my case was, he still gets Sada A, and he just gave away Sada B and C to Shimon, since he got up, no one should be kind of. The Sheni shouldn't be kind of either, because both of them are a matnas chemira. So it can't be b'shemes. The chazar mixes havi chazara. The din is taka the chazar mixes havi chazara b'kula, and reisha miskachas la ben shemes ben she'amad, and the reisha could be either it was mace or it was amad. Like we were trying to avoid the conclusion that chazar mixes havi chazara. But like we said, it's whether it's mace or amad, it's still going to come to the conclusion you have to say that. So there's no reason to say it's talking about bedavka b'shamad. It could also be b'shemes. And the sefer can only be understood b'shamad, because otherwise, why would the sheni get to keep what he got? It should be a chazara, and nobody should get anything. Okay, let's stop over here. Shkoyach.
Thank you. Good luck. 8:40.
8:40 tomorrow. Bez Hashem.
Wonderful.
Yes,
Thank you so much. Good luck.
Good.